From formation to taxation, covering inflation, temptation, high expectations, and that dreaded stagnation, we bring to you Hip Nation.
Hello, Hip Nation, and welcome to another episode. This is episode 8, Energy, Endurance, and Unwavering Persistence. I am Shay.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are here today with a very special guest, Francesca Amante.
Hello. Hey, Francesca. So happy you're here, finally.
Yay!
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. I am right on. Let's just kick this right off to a good start. And why don't you tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, hi, my name is Francesca Amante. I'm very honored to know both Sarah and Shay from our Junior Chamber chapter here in Penticton. I am an agent with Amante Real Estate in Royal LePage, Kelowna. I'm an exclusive agent for a major development in Kelowna. I'm our current national vice president for the Junior Chamber International and our past president for the local chapter here. I'm the national effective speaking winner for the Junior Chamber. And then I won top 3 at Conference of Americas in Panama City, which was on Zoom for that speaking competition. And I just won the top 3 award for most outstanding new member at World Congress just recently, which was really quite an honor. So that was neat. And then essentially, I love to speak. That was one thing that kind of caught me by surprise in my last couple years of my journey. So I'll be speaking in St. Louis. I just got asked by a TEDx speaker to go there to speak in 2022. Thank you. And and this past year I got to speak for a couple TEDx speakers as their closing keynotes at the North American Academy and kind of events like that. It just brings me a lot of joy and passion.
Dang.
Like listening to you talk about all of your accomplishments, I'm like thinking like, if I ever felt like I was accomplished, now I feel like I haven't accomplished shit. No. You are so incredible. You're so incredible.
In my brain, I just kept, I'm like, she's taking on these challenges. I always think of like mountains and challenges, and she's like climbing, scaling everything, slaying it like nobody's business. And like, oh yeah, I reached the peak of this, and I reached the peak of this, and I'm pretty much just awesome. So I'm sitting here being like, oh my God. Like, and the thing too is that you're really young. And you've got all these accomplishments. So you're proving that age isn't a restriction, which is pretty freaking amazing.
It's true. And I don't know if you feel comfortable saying your age, but I personally feel like your age is very relevant on your journey, of your successful journey. So you can share it if you want to.
First off, you both are way too kind. For those that can't see my face, I'm smiling ear to ear. But I am 27. I'm turning 28 December 31st of this year. And but I'm an old soul. I always have been. So that's why I gravitate to people in their 30s to 50s mostly are my best friends. So
what were you doing at 27? Because I know I wasn't like slaying the world.
Nope.
Oh,
I
was popping out all the babies. That's what I was doing.
Aww.
Yeah, no.
That's awesome too.
Until you're in it. No. But no, you're definitely taking on the world by storm, and you can see that there's no restrictions for you. So that's pretty incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you have quite the story, though. I mean, we've seen you on Instagram and Facebook, and followed you. But for our listeners who don't know you, what's your past? What kind of led you to where you are today, and some of your history?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some of the things I'll be sharing on this podcast I don't typically talk about, so we're going to be getting deep. For those of you that
we love deep,
yeah, no other way to deep.
I mean, you did make this like 19 plus, but come on. Anyways,
oh my God. So
Yeah.
we'll be getting deep for sure. So for those of the listeners out there that don't know me, my older brother passed away at 16 years old in a car accident. So being raised into a family that had lost a son, that was something that really shaped my life. From a really young age, I never really understood why, like talk about grief, right? Like I never really understood why my parents were always sad all the time. And I didn't really understand, but all I knew is that like it was my role somehow. I don't know how this got into my head, that it was my role. I'd either take away their sadness, and then if I didn't, that they would like get rid of me. That was like my biggest fear when I was younger. So when I was sitting on my staircase this one time, I'd heard, my mom talking on the phone, and I looked at her when she got off the phone, and I was like 5 or 6. And I was like, Mom, why are you and Dad always sad? And she's like, well, and she told me about my brother and how he had died in a car accident. And
how old were you at this time?
I wasn't even born.
Oh.
So yeah, my brother and sister, like they were only a couple years apart. He died at 16. And then my mom and dad tried for 5 years to have a child, finally gave up, and then they had me, which was crazy. So my brother's name was Francesco, and I was named Francesca. So for many years of my life, not that I felt like I was in his shadow, but I definitely felt like I was this weird replacement child, or not replacement, but like this child that was born to like fill a void. And my brother has this incredible legacy where like he would literally make everybody smile when he walked into the room. He was compassionate. Like he was so funny. Like I've seen like little clips and videos, and I'm just like, I always remember thinking as a young child, I'm like, how am I going to live up to this man? Like everybody, like when he passed, like there's awards after him. There's all these things in honor of what kind of impact he made in such a short time on this earth. And so anyways, as a young child, this was a huge thing that shaped me, because it really, I'll kind of get into this later in the podcast, but it really took me on this trajectory of truly finding myself, because for about 19 years of my life, I really was trying to just live to make my folks happy. I just wanted them to be like, to heal, to be okay. This is something that I don't really share, but when I was a young child, one of our family members that is grieving, and, I have so much compassion for that. But when she left the house, she said, we was at a dinner, and she goes, I wish you were dead and Frank were here. And I recognize that's coming from a place of grief and, hurt. But I remember as a young child, I looked at my mom and I was like, then why am I here? And she's like, no, like we wanted to have you. But it never made sense to me. Like, I was like, but then why am I here then? If so many people miss him and I can't be him. So that was my life for so long. So it really, like a lot of my childhood that's why I feel like I've always been a bit of an old soul. I've seen through a lot of life through the lens of grief, which makes you change your trajectory on everything. You recognize that I can have a conversation with you right now, Sarah, or with you, Shay. Most people, not that's a bad thing, but they're like, maybe it's a good thing. They leave and they go, okay, see you tomorrow. I don't look at it that way. I go, I have this moment. I'm going to cherish it and be so present, because I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow or you guys. Like that's just how our family looks at it, right? But nonetheless, so as my life went on, there kind of came a point, and this was a huge part of my journey. I was about 19 years old, and I was like this youth leader with mentoring youth for a couple years. And we went to this conference, and the speaker was speaking on stage, and I don't know what it was that he said, but something hit me, and I just burst into tears. And all these youth that knew a bit of my story, but not much, they've never seen me cry. I was always the tough cookie. Like I was always strong for them. And this one young girl, her name was Becca, still a friend of mine, but at the time she was 16, she walked up to me, and she didn't know much about my journey. I don't know where this came from. Talk about the universe. I don't know, but she looked at me. I know your thoughts on the universe, but she came up to me and she goes, Francesca, I think something up there is trying to tell you don't need to be Francesca and Francesco, but being you is enough. Mm. And it was in that exact moment that my whole life changed. I came home and I was like, Mom, Dad, like I'm going to start living for me. And how I've wrote my entire life up until now, like that's changing. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do that. And they were like, they didn't even know that that's the lens I was living out of. They're like, we didn't know you were doing all of this for us. And I was like, I'm going to start living for me. So that was the moment in my life where I found the most freedom. And then, and that kind of stems off into the rest of what I'll be sharing later in the podcast. But that's a huge part of what makes me who I am today, for sure.
God damn.
That is that is so deep and impactful. And like for parents that are listening, this is like so monumental for your connection with your children. Is like grief is huge. And as adults, we've lived through it or we've seen something. Sometimes we don't recognize that our kids haven't. And so what I take from this, other than that this is a huge impact on where you are today, and it explains like a lot of behind the scenes of why you're so driven and why you're so successful and why you do appreciate life so much. But also for our kids is like checking in with them, making sure that you have that relationship and you're, not living day to day, but that you're like connecting and you know exactly what's going on. Because, your life could have been so much more different, but you're taking it the way that it is, and you look at how you've blossomed from something that was maybe a little bit darker in the beginning. Yeah. So out of the darkness, great things bloom, right?
Oh, she's getting deep.
Thank you.
Anyways. But yeah, so what after that pivotal moment where you changed your perspective and you're like, I'm going to start living for me. What was your next step?
Well, I mean, so much in my life changed after that. Like there's, one of the biggest things, and kind of to explain a bit about my background too, like when I was younger, I was like heavily involved in sports. So I always think back to the analogy of the ice. I was a figure skater for years from the time I was like 4 till about 2021. Or sorry, not the year of 2021, the age of 20/21. I competed in figure skating. I competed in tap, ballet, jazz, point, lyrical. That was like a massive part. So kind of like up until that point, it was just always about like, how hard are you working? Like it was always about the drive for my family, at least. Like, if I would go to school, I would go to skating from like 6 to 8 in the morning. I'd go to school, I'd come home, and it was skating. Then you'd be in the dance studio until everybody figured out the damn dance routine. And one kid's talking in the back, you're there at the studio for an extra 2 hours, having 8 for 6 hours. Like it was just, that was my life. You come home, you practice the piano, you get up, you go to swimming class, and you do it over and over and over again. I literally can remember maybe 3 or 4 play dates in my entire childhood because they were few and far between.
Whoa.
So that was like such a massive part of, when I talk about persistence, right? Like unwavering persistence. I think about my coach, Sherry, who's a dear friend of mine till this day. She's in her 40s. And she's seen me through every chapter of my journey, including my divorce, marriage, everything. And Sherry always talked to me about how, like we use the analogy of the ice, like that ice is far from forgiving. You fall down, it is hard as like, it's tough as nails, and you have to get back up and you just keep trying. And much of that, like life, there's so many chapters that are, how would I word it? They're far from forgiving. We lose loved ones. We say goodbyes that we never thought we'd have to say goodbye. We have our hearts broken. Whatever it is in our life, but it's similar to that of the ice. You get back up. It's your choice how quickly you want to get back up. But grateful for that background, because now, to answer your question, Shay, where all of this brought me to, every single part of my journey until this day, especially in the midst of like saying goodbye to people that, it's heart-wrenching, saying goodbye to people that you love along the way. If it wasn't for me understanding my brother's journey and then like my sport background, I probably wouldn't be able to do it like I have been. Just has brought me a greater understanding of like how to deal with things when curveballs are thrown your way. But yeah, essentially after that point of 19, I was working for a company named Clinique. I graduated at 16 years old, 6 months early, and I was skating.
6 months early?
Yeah, so I'm born at the end of the year, and I was never held back. So because I'm the youngest in my grade, being born on the last day of the year, I was only 16 when I graduated.
Whoa.
Yeah, so fun fact. So I graduated early, and I just skated my ass off all the time, pardon the French. And then I got offered to work at a place called Clinique. If you're not familiar with that, it's a cosmetic company. And I essentially worked there, and then I ended up moving up with the company, and I would travel all over. I pretty much was 17 years old at the Four Seasons or the Fairmont Pacific, getting my paper delivered to me and my breakfast to my door. Wow. And I was like training these consultants in these, conference rooms. I remember thinking to myself, man, this is kind of cool. So I did that for a while. And then in 2014, I got engaged. So I wanted to, stay a little bit more closer to home. And that's kind of the next part of the journey that I'll be talking about. But one thing I do want to share, if I may, because you guys talk so much about like entrepreneurship and management, leadership and all that. One thing that I never forgot and has always stuck with me, I was like 17 years old. It's kind of a cute moment. I was working at Clinique, and this rep came. His name's Corey Waters, love him till this day. And he came from Vancouver, and he goes, Francesca, how's like your counter sales going? I'm like, I think good. And I'd been at the counter for 6 months. And he's like, okay. He's like, and blah, blah, blah. He's asking me some questions. He goes, how's your DBA? I'm like, DBA what? He's like, your daily business record. I'm like, oh, I don't have a daily business record. He's like, do you know what your goals are every month? I'm like, no. He's like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, my clients come to the counter, and I just make sure they have what they need, and I follow up with them. And I was like, why are you asking? Like, am I in trouble? He goes, no, but this counter has been below sales for years. In the last 6 months, you've exceeded your target, like substantially every single month. So we just want to know what you're doing. And I was like, I don't know. I'm just there for my clients, and I just genuinely get what they need and make sure I follow up. And anyways, that's kind of where they kind of took me on a different trajectory with the company, and I started working alongside them, which was really cool. But that moment always stuck with me, that if you take care of the people, the numbers don't matter, like the books don't matter. And that's something that Corey said. He's like, I'm in my 30s. He's like, you just reminded me that this daily business record means shit. That if we just look at people in the eye and follow up with them, and like I would invite like my elderly clients to my skating competitions or to like, tea or whatever. And then you build this relationship. Yeah, they only buy maybe a smaller quantity. I didn't care. I loved the person, right? So anyways, that was a moment. There's so many moments throughout your journey that remind you, like, okay, that's what I have to remember, no matter where my journey takes me or how big things get, remember the small things. So yeah, do you want me to talk about like my journey from like the engagement onward?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in 2014, I got engaged, grateful for that, because like as an Italian family, they're not really keen on you leaving the house unless there's some kind of engagement in the works. So thank you. So happy. Sorry, Mom and Dad, love you both, but a bird's got to leave the nest. So that's cool. Anyway, so I got engaged, and at that time, I remember I looked at my folks and I was like, hey, look, I know this is crazy, but I want to invest in something. They're like, oh yeah, what do you want to invest in, Francesca? I was like, a house. Like, I want to invest in a house. They're like, you're 20. I'm like, yeah, but I just feel like I might as well do it now. The market's going to raise. I don't know. So I called this agent. I should have, now I know better, but you don't just call an agent off the sign. You should do your homework on what agent you want to use, but whatever. I called this agent off the sign. I'm like, hey, look, I want to buy this house like today. Anyway, she's like, oh, okay, sure. Sounds good. Meets me at my house. I have no idea. I mean, God bless the agent, but she told me to put an unconditional offer because there's so much interest. I mean, whatever. That's fine. Yeah. In hindsight, I'm like, I should have been a little bit more careful, but I don't care because it got me into that house. And the reason I'm saying this is that you guys, and if you've looked into the previous podcast, which I just recently did, and they talk a lot about energy and the universe and Sarah's like cute view on it, but I'm a huge believer. I'm a huge believer in the universe. So what I'm about to share with you, it's really cool that like I always believe nothing happens by accident. So essentially, if I hadn't gotten engaged, I wouldn't have had the idea to get that house. Got that house. I never stopped being in touch with the agent that the house was sold to us by. And so I followed up with her. I was like, look, I'm painting this and blah, blah, blah. Because I kept in touch with her, in 2015, she calls me. She goes, hey, I want to see you in my office. I'm like, okay. And at this time, I had a really fantastic position with Clinique. I was traveling and I loved my job. But she calls me into her office and said, what's going on? She goes, well, I want to offer you a job to be my assistant. I was like, no. And she's like, no, I think you'd really like it. You know what? Just start part-time. If you don't like it, no sweat. I walk into this Royal LePage office and I'm like, I knew it. I fell in love with it. I loved the broker. I loved the people. I loved just everything. It took what I was doing before to like a whole nother level. So in 2016, I had just gotten married. Marsha was engaged, and I had just gotten married, and I started working as an agent. Not as an agent, as an agent's assistant. And I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, like all these pieces that had fallen into place to get me to that moment. I was like, wow, So then I'm, working in there, and then I remember, the day where my life changed, and my divorce happened and everything like that. I got married at 22 years old and was divorced at 23. We were together for 4 years, and the person's amazing. It's just we weren't meant to be together, and that's okay. Yeah, it's such a gift, the time that you get to spend with people in your life, right? But what was really cool when my divorce happened is that, at 23 years old, you don't know who you are. Mm-hmm. You really don't. And then when that happens, you're like, oh my gosh. But that office was just my rock. It was everything. And I literally, from that day onward, I called my boss at the time, which is a different agent. And I said, look, like, this is what happened. And I'm on my way to the office and I'm just sobbing. He's like, you need to go home. I'm like, okay, but then I'm going to take calls from home because his phone was call forwarded to me. I just did not want to stop working. Mm-hmm. But I showed up at work the next day and I did not take a day off for a year and a half.
Wow.
was the first to get to the office every morning, and I was the last to leave. Roger Love, if you're in the audience listening, I know I set the alarm off at 10:59 p.m. so many nights, but I don't regret a single moment of it, and I'm very grateful for that element of my journey. This is where it gets interesting. So in 2018, I had given my notice to the agent I was working with. Amazing human that I got to work with, but something was calling me to Kelowna, and I didn't really understand why. And then one of my cousins was like, well, your brother always wanted to live in Kelowna. That was his dream. And I was like, no way. Cool. So I put it out to the universe. I said, look, I'm quitting my job and I don't know what's next. I do not have a plan, but you're going to show me, because I've never applied for a job. I've always had them offered to me. And I got a call from, 2 amazing agents in Kelowna, and they were like, hey, we want you to work we want to work with you. And they'd been following my Instagram journey, and they had commented and said, hey, like, you should come work with us one day. But we finally met, and that came about, and I left. an amazing office family, a solid position. I was actually working for 2 developers at the time as their developer's assistant for 2 developments, as well as working full-time for that top producing agent. Wow. That was the 7 days a week thing. So I left to Kelowna, and this is the interesting part. So I leave and I say goodbye. They had this huge going away thing. It was heart-wrenching to leave. And I was working for these 2 agents, and I love them dearly to this day. They're incredible people. At the time, I'd only worked for them for 2 months, and then they let me go. And was I ready for the position? Probably not. Was I at my best self post-divorced? No, because I had my house up for sale. Like, everything was changing. Because when I had left to Kelowna, I thought, well, put the house up on the market, put an offer on a house there. I gotta, move my things along, right? So anyways, 2 months later, they let me go, and I'll never forget it. I went down the elevator with my little box of things, and they didn't have enough hours for me. And there was a whole bunch of elements. They're like, we just don't think this is the right timing. I was like, no, I know, I can feel that too. And I had to trust it. But still, I was just like, well, crap. So I'm going down the elevator. I remember driving over the bridge, just sobbing, looking over my right shoulder, thinking, will I ever go back to Kelowna? So I get home. My best friend will love this. I get home, and it was October 31st of 2018. She was supposed to come over to watch like a Halloween movie and, just have some girl time. But of course, she cuts into my house, and I'm curled up in the fetal position on the couch, and I'm beside myself. And she just looks at me and she goes, yeah, this is not the energy I was expecting to walk into tonight. So you just need to get over your shit, and you're going to be fine. And I'm going to go hang out with my other friend because I just want to have like a light evening. I'm like, okay. So she's like, just get up and go to the gym tomorrow. Everything will be fine. But in that moment, I remember thinking to myself, I'm not a wife. My house is for sale. Mind you, this house that I had an offer on in Kelowna collapsed that very same day.
Like physically collapsed?
No, like the deal collapsed.
Okay.
Because my house hadn't sold in time. Like, literally everything around me had crushed. I had just been let go from a job. And I was like, I literally am at a blank slate. There is nothing, like, I do not have anything defining who Francesca is. In that moment, it felt like the most devastating feeling. But that's like another level of that freedom of like, I get to figure out who the heck I am. Mm-hmm. So the next morning, I took her advice. I got over it. And I listened to Tony Robbins, and I listened to Steve Harvey. And of course, Tony Robbins' thing is you just make it happen, and you will make it happen until it happens. So I was like, I don't care if I have to drive to Kelowna every damn day until I am working and living in Kelowna to prove to the universe that my house is going to sell. I'm going to find a house there. So I did. I left. I drove there, and I was like, you know what, maybe I'll get like a pass at Spinco or something, right? So I walk up there, they were closed. I said, fine. So I went downstairs, and down below Spinco is Lululemon. And I've been using Lululemon products for years because I'm a figure skater. So I walk in, and I'm like, hey, do you know when Spinco's opening up? And I don't know what possessed me, but I opened my mouth. I said, are you guys hiring? Like, I've never asked that question in my life. Not that's bad, but I just never have. And they're like, we do our last group interview tomorrow. We're interviewing like 20 people. Did you want to come? I'm like, sure. So I showed up, and out of those people, they chose me. I'm like, okay, universe, you're talking to me. Obviously, this is meant to happen. If you don't know, Lulu's an incredible company, not to mention community. So I thought maybe this is meant to happen. I can work here while I'm studying for my exam, and it gives me a reason to drive to Kelowna every fucking day.
Yeah.
Until I live there.
Yeah.
So I did. And everything just started falling into place. But there's like, how we talk about like surrendering? Mm-hmm. Do you want me to share about like the surrendering of the house? So I'm just going to share this. So like what happened was, I was like I was working in Kelowna, and I was getting to a point where, how would I describe it? Like things were starting to fall into place. Like I was studying really hard for my real estate exam, so I was getting closer to that, but my house just wasn't selling. And I got home this one day, and I just I sat at the edge of my staircase, and I was just, tears rolling down my eyes. And I was like, universe, God, I need this house to sell. I need this, especially when you go through a divorce, you want those past remnants just to be gone so you can start a new chapter. And I finally surrendered in that moment. I'm like, you know what? Look, I got to make peace with this house. I got to just have fun in it in the last, decorate it with Christmas stuff, love it one last time. And then maybe, it'll finally leave my grasp. And it did. The next day we got an offer on the house. And I thought, wow, talk about surrendering. But I just want to share this quote with you because I think this is a huge part of my journey. So in this book that I love, my friend Dewey, she works at headquarters at Lulu. She had bought this book for me. And
what's the title of the book?
So it's called The Path Made Clear by Oprah Winfrey. And she quotes so many incredible speakers throughout the book. And she quotes Michael Bernard Beckwith. And they're having a conversation. And Michael says, once you release your grasp, then you give up your resistance, and then which is for you will come to you. And Oprah says, aha, that's the aha moment. Because when you want it, it doesn't show up. He goes, exactly. Yes, your message to the universe. Yes, Sarah, universe. In that moment is I want it, which is translating to I don't have it, so you can't receive it. And Oprah goes, oh, so you end up blocking your own blessing that way. He goes, exactly. And that was the moment for me that with anything in my life, the second I'm trying too hard or I'm chasing something or I think to myself, I know what's best for me, that's when I just release my grasp and go, I need to surrender. And it always takes me back to that moment of trying to sell my house, that when you just give up and say, you know what, whatever's meant to come will come.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, stop trying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So that's a little, yeah.
That's so deep. I just put it in my Amazon basket.
The book? Yeah. Right on.
I'm sorry, I can't help it.
So good.
Like when you hear something super good or it comes into your life, you're just like, yeah, I need that advice for sure.
Oprah's a very wise woman too.
She's
amazing. And even though I shun the universe and stuff, she's very smart, and I've taken a lot of her advice in the past. She's amazing.
Yeah, she really is.
Yeah. What happened next?
Yeah, so that was around that time. My house finally sold, and then I put an offer on a house in West Kelowna, and that's where I live till this day, and I love it. I look out to the water, and it's peaceful, and thank gosh I bought when I did. This market is insane.
Yes.
But, it's crazy when I think about the people that I was meant to meet. And this goes back to where I believe the universe comes into play. Every single person that I've met on my journey, even there was one event I got invited to at the Kelowna Yacht Club. It was for this 100 Heroes That Care event. If I hadn't gotten to know this one particular person, I wouldn't have ended up in that room. This other individual, which is an agent, wouldn't have approached me, I wouldn't have ended up in a certain office, which changed the trajectory of my real estate career because they were the ones that encouraged me, get your license, you can do this and whatever. And when I was studying for my exam, that was the hugest thing. My mind toyed with me so much. I was like, I can't do this. I know Les Brown always talks about, he lived in his head for 14 years. Because he would go and see these speakers, but he would come home and his mind would say, you can't do that, Les Brown. I don't know if you know that's motivational speaker, but I love him. And I lived in my head. Everything around me, I was living in my heart. But when it came to my exam, I was just living in my head. So I remember I took it the first time. I was so close, mere percentage away, and I failed. But I was glad I failed because I'm like, no, I need to really prove that I want this so bad. Let's do this again. So on the second time I passed. Of course. But I remember those moments leading up to that exam that I thought, my gosh, I remember it's just so funny when you think about how there was a version of yourself that prayed to be exactly where you are today. You hope that you'd be exactly where you are today. Mm-hmm. I mean, I look at you too and everything that you're doing, right? And all the defeats, all of the challenges, all the obstacles that brought you to where you are today. Any of those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, can I do this? Let me look at where you guys are. You're amazing.
Oh my God, you make us sound like we're celebrities or something. Jesus.
But my observation
to live up to
is that you are comfortable with the concept of failure.
Yes.
You've lived it. you've plugged through it, and you know that, failure is just another factor of life. That's what I perceive is that,
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a mindset, and that is definitely developed. And you can see that like there's a different comparison level that people that have gone through failures and persisted like you have a different perspective on life. So it's like, oh, fuck that. I'm going to go for whatever I want to go for. This is my goal. This is what I want to go for. And I'm fucking driven regardless of what's going to happen. Failure is just a portion of the journey. It's just a part of the journey. Just keep plugging.
Absolutely.
So, for those people that are, like you said, you were just stuck in your head while you were doing your exam.
Yeah.
What can people do to get out of that? What can they, how can they get past that and continue on? Like, I think when you're stuck in that failure mode, it's really hard to get past it.
Totally.
So what do you do?
Well, I mean, I think that recognizing that that's not going to come at one part of your journey and then just disappear. Like it's going to keep showing up, and you just have to know how to mitigate it. So, when my divorce happened, that was a huge one. You're either going to live in your head or you're going to drop down to your heart. I have a life coach, and I love her dearly. She always talks about, get out of your head, Francesca, drop down to your heart. When you're in your head, nothing works. The bus is being driven by either the ego, it's being driven by all these different elements that are not going to serve you. So the second that I drop down to my heart, I'm like, all of a sudden I go, I'm so grateful to be here, because gratitude rules my life. I wake up and I'm like, I'm grateful to be here. And hey, I'm just grateful to be writing this exam. I have the ability to see, to write, to understand. And once you're in that space, you're like, well, I guess it really doesn't matter what happens, because I'm, and I think when people talk about, they're like, oh, I'm so nervous for this interview. I'm like, why? Walk into that room and recognize that your only purpose in this moment is to bless the people around you. You're going to make somebody smile, somebody laugh, or someone roll their eyes. Like, oh, well, like that's the only thing. That's a gift of you just being in their presence. Anything that happens, whether you get the job or you don't, it's not going to matter. Right. So I would say that anytime that you are in that mode of like fear of failure, recognizing that, get out of your head, drop down to your heart, and just even say out loud 3 things that you're grateful for. So in that moment, what I would do, I would just be like, I am worthy of writing this exam. I'm worthy of being a real estate agent. I'm worthy of living my dream. And I'm so grateful to be able to have this opportunity to do that. And I mean, once you say those couple of things out loud, I mean, either you just believe it's bullshit, or if you really feel those words, you're like, okay, let's do this, right? I mean, I think one of our biggest killers is it's ourselves. I think there's a quote Da Vinci talks about, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can't do us no harm. And one of my biggest life lessons has been, the second I stopped giving a shit about what everybody else thinks, my life just got 10 million times better.
Damn, yes.
Because I lived my entire 19 years caring about what my parents thought, or what a religious organization that they were a part of thought. And I said, fuck that. And then I cared about, what do the agents in the office care? What do they think? The second that you remove and delete, it's all patterns, right? We're born into these certain patterns and rhythms that we're either taught by our parents or just from, different, bloodlines or whatever. And then once you kind of delete those, you start living your life so much more clear. I'm going to give a really good example of that, about the failure part. When I left Penticton, I left like a group of people that were very, very close to me. A lot of agents I love dearly until this day. They're great. They're great humans. However, when I got let go from that particular job, and there was that little couple months section of when I was studying for my exam, I didn't have a title or a big logo attached to my name. There were certain people that fell away, and I thought, this is really interesting. Because, and that's not a bad thing, but some people are very attached to, well, what money do you make? What's your brand? What's your brokerage? And I thought it mattered. And there was a portion of time I thought, oh my gosh, well, why am I not worthy enough of them like wanting to keep in touch? It didn't matter. And now I look, and these people eventually do come back. They're like, oh, hey, I'm like, hey, what's up? And that's okay. But I think that what's really cool in those moments, I was able to recognize that, if you truly love who you are and you're very, very certain of the journey that you're on and where you're going, it's not going to matter what anyone else thinks. Yeah. Someone could say to you, Sarah, you're meant to be doing this, isn't it? You go, no, because I'm living, to your core, and I know this, you're living your dream. This is your vision. It's so clear. I mean, the energy in here, you can tell it's so genuine. But there could be 1,000 haters out there that could say differently. To your core, you're exactly where you're meant to be, right? So that was that's a huge part of what has kept me strong through the failure part.
Your vibe definitely attracts a tribe.
Yes. That's a shout out to Tracy Van Rays.
Tracy.
But it genuinely does, because you're absolutely right. When you are at your lowest point or you have nothing, it's those people that are still there or that come into the picture that actually matter. Like one of the most humbling moments was when I was like, I'm going back to school. I'm going to be a student. You know, you go from this position where you're like, you've got a lot and people are forced to respect you in that position. I would say they do. It depends on how you approach it. But, and then you go to this low moment and suddenly you start attracting people that are like, you know, and those are the people that will vibe with you till you reach that position again. And you can definitely see that in your life. Like the people that you attract are like everywhere. It's contagious. People like seek out your energy, and you just like, you know, even before they meet you, you listen to Francesca's speeches. If you go, they're on, like she's done some TED Talks. So
I haven't done a TED Talk yet.
Oh,
I've like been asked to speak as a closing keynote for TED speakers, but I am in the process of putting a TED Talk together. I just want to make sure.
I watched one and I thought it said TED Talk on it, and you were, was it?
It's because there was a speaker that was a TED speaker. Absolutely.
But so, but I've listened to Francesca speak, and it's contagious. Like you just want to be there because you can see the passion. And when you're like, you see that people are passionate. It's just like when you watch Sarah work. I'm like, she's like an artist, and she's in love with her development. And it's changed a lot more now. It's more about the business. Like you can see her passion in the business and how things are migrating, but you're attracted to people that are like that are so passionate about one thing. Absolutely. And so you definitely attract your tribe that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Shay. Yeah. And I think too, you find that you will, all of the moments that were not always like peachy and like, you know, everything was perfect. Like those are the moments that people respect the most out of you. Because I think that there's almost like this taboo culture of like, let's not talk about the failures. It's like, no, let's talk about them. Every entrepreneur that I know that I respect the heck out of, they are so tough because of all the things that they've been through. I mean, if you look at Steve Harvey was homeless for countless years. And you look at his journey.
I love him.
Oh my gosh. I listen to him every day. And when I listen to him, and it's just such a reminder that like, he would not be who he is if he just woke up and everything was just perfect. No one would respect that. Yeah. Because it's not relatable. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. There was, I want me to share like, just like kind of on the defeat aspect. Like, I think like, I mean, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but when it comes to like, you know, being an entrepreneur, a business owner or whatever, a sole proprietor, like one of the biggest things that people don't talk about are like those moments where like I remember I'm like I have nothing really left in the bank account because expenses are high and commissions haven't come in or it's a dry patch. That's okay. That's normal. Yeah. And it makes the successes. I mean, this year I remember, you know, a couple commission checks that came in and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm holding this amount on a check in my hand all at once. How is this happening? It makes you appreciate those moments 10 times more, right? This past year, actually, there was about $20,000 that was withheld from me from like a couple deals or whatever from, you know, at the time, people that I had really, really trusted. And it was such a hard thing to swallow this past year. I was like, because you just care so much about the people. It's not even about the money, but to those people, maybe that amounts pennies. But to me, it was so much. I was like, I would be honored to have that amount that I worked so hard for. But I remember when I was talking to one of the builders that I work with, and he said to me, he goes, Francesca, he says, this moment is so cool. And I said, why? And he's like, because he's like, I just added another dimension to your story about that there are some, you know, some interesting moments out there, and this industry is tough as nails, and not every moment's going to be something that you're going to be stoked about. He says, but anyways, he just described to me some of the things in his life, and he said, Francesca, he's like, those are the moments that are going to make you pretty darn tough. And you know, I always say that anytime that something is either, you know, withheld or taken or whatever, the universe usually has a way of putting something back in. In this particular year, there was someone that I was working alongside that looked at me and said, hey, you weren't the listing agent on this house, but you did so much work, and I want to give you a check of the same amount that those people took from you.
Wow.
Whoa. Of $20,000 to say, hey, this is our way of saying we're sorry you had to go through that, but thank you for your service that we didn't even ask you to do and you gave to our clients, other clients.
Damn.
And I just like bawled. I was like, oh my gosh,
That's so crazy.
I don't even know what I would do with 20,000. I'd probably be like Bieber and just blow it all in one day.
Oh no, I literally would you would see like a Carlton dance come from me. I'd be like, it's unusual. Anyways, but it would be so good. Like, it's just those moments where you're just like flying high for sure. Yeah. My mom calls them campfire stories when you go through like moments that test your energy and your ability to make it through. She calls them campfire stories because she's like, you sit down around a fire and you tell scary stories.
Yeah.
You tell terrifying stories. And then they usually have a good outcome. Not always, but they're the moments that you really bond, because being around a fireplace or a fire pit has always been a bonding moment in every culture.
So true.
Yeah.
So she always compares it to that. And she's like, when something bad happens, I'll be just super frustrated. And she'll be like, no, it's fine. You just got another campfire story.
I love that.
That's so sweet. I love it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Crazy. But where are you going now? Like, what is your next endeavor? What do you see coming up in the next little bit here for you?
Okay. Well,
oh God. Deep question.
I love being a real estate agent. It's not so much about really the hype of the industry. I just love helping people. Brings me back to my Clinique days of just, encountering every single person's journey. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for the more people that are meant to meet. I do find most of the people that I attract in the industry, oddly enough, are a lot of women that have just recently been divorced. I'm like, tell me about yourself. And they're like, well, I just went through a divorce. I'm like, that's why we're meant to meet. That's awesome. Like, I'll take good care of you. Let's chat. And we're going to just make this a super happy, loving experience. But I'm just excited for the people I'm meant to meet. My goal in real estate, obviously, I'm very thankful for the development that I'm working alongside. It's a 103 lot subdivision. It's beautiful. I'm so grateful for the builders, the developers. It's been this incredible experience. I'm excited for more developments to come in the future. I do tend to take on a lot more on the luxury real estate side of things. So just, expanding in that area. And so, because it's only been my first year technically on my own as an agent. So I'm excited for more of that. But a big thing, I'm working on a TED Talk right now, which is really exciting.
What's the topic? Can you say?
No.
Okay,
that's okay. But that's really exciting. I'm really honored for that. And then also too, this TEDx speaker that I got to speak as his closing keynote last year, that's flying me out to St. Louis this year. I'm just really excited to work alongside himself and all of his partners as well in future, and just kind of see where that goes. I'm not opposed to being an agent that also travels and speaks. That's kind of something that I'm kind of like in the works of kind of making happen. But there's some other things that I guess maybe I'll share closer to when they're actually happening. Sure. But on the whole, I love just being around people that are like-minded. So Sarah and Shay are a really great example of that, and all of my JCI colleagues, because when you're doing things with people that just genuinely care about others, this life is just so much more fulfilling.
Oh, well said.
Yes.
I got chills.
And I want to share this with you guys because this is a huge part of where you're saying like where I'm going. So 2 things. There's a mentor that I look up to dearly, and he's the one that I had gotten this essence from. He always says, if you take care of the work takes care of you. And one thing he had said was, if you Facetune an app of yourself, like that Facetune app, and do it of yourself to be like 80 years old. So anyways, what I had done, I Facetune myself to the age of 80, framed that and put it on the desk. And I look at future me every single day, because if I don't work my ass off for that person's going to come back in time and kick my ass.
What?
So if I look at
I'm sorry, Steve, but oh my goodness, like that is so motivational right there.
Oh, Steve, the sound guy, for the record.
Yeah. He's like, no clapping. I'm like, too bad.
Steve the sound guy or Steve Harvey?
No,
Steve the sound
guy. He hates it when we clap.
I love it. Yeah. So looking at that 80-year-old photo of myself, if I don't work my ass off, that person's going to come back in time and kick my ass. So future me, like that's who I got to work for every single day. So, regardless of where the journey's taking me or who I'm meant to meet along the way or what, obstacles and opportunities are going to come my way, as long as I'm working my ass off for that person that deserves the future that I want her to live, that's what I'm wanting to do every day. And I want her to be able to look back and smile year to year and say, you know what, she really gave it her all. And she didn't leave any stone unturned. She didn't take anyone for granted. And,
Yeah. This, first of all, what's this fellow's name, your mentor?
Oh, no. So I have 2 business coaches and a life coach. This particular person actually is Ryan Serhant. Oh, he's just someone.
My hero too.
Yeah, he's my ultimate mentor, role model in not only our industry, but I just think in general in this world. I think that the way that he looks at things and how he executes himself. So when he had talked about that, I thought to myself, man, that is just like, so anyways, the second I did that, and it's been a while now, and I look at that photo and I'm like, how can you waste a day? Like, that's where we're headed. We're going to get there before we know it, right? Actually, Steve Harvey talks about how he's like, you don't want to get to your deathbed. And around your deathbed, there's all these unlived potentials and all these gifts that had come to you. And they say, we came to you, but only you could have given us life. And it's like, how do you want to feel when you're at your deathbed and you all these things that you could have done, that you knew you could have done, but you procrastinated. You said, no, I don't believe in myself. I don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. So I just want to live every single day that I have here on this earth to the fullest.
I think something that's pretty useful is, like, when I was younger, they had moments that you could step in and help. It's a little different now with COVID, so you'd have to go through a different process. But when I was young, they had where you could step in and go visit elderly, or you could. So when I was younger, I was a hairdresser, and one of our things is we got to go in and cut hair for cancer patients and elderly. And I think this is crucial for our younger demographic, because until you hear their experiences, and that was reciprocated by many of them, where it was like, you know what I regret? The things that I didn't do, or the chances I didn't take, or how many times I got upset, or, not forgiving people over ridiculous things. Like, living with regret is like the worst way to go out.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just
so true.
Just, listen to, there's a reason why they say to, like, get advice from the people around you and learn from their stories and those people that know more, but also consult the older ones.
Yes.
They're smart.
We have so much to learn from them.
Heck yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I'll still swear and cuss and do whatever the hell I want to do, but I'll still take their advice.
Coming from the girl who says
fork nuggets
on toast.
Well, it's okay. There's a reason for it. I have a 5-year-old, and she's very perceptive on things. The other day, she's walking around and it's cold outside, and she's like, "Oh, Mom, it's freaking cold." Like, I can't have her go to school and say that.
So funny.
Like, they'd be like, "So, Mrs. Duggan, let's talk about this," and I'd be like, "Oh, you see." Yeah, like, how do you explain that? But no, like, we're still going to be the people that we want to be on the inside. But yeah, you need to, but you're actively sourcing out positive information and influences around you. Mm-hmm. You're seeking that out.
Yeah.
And that's such a positive perspective to have. You're not living in negativity.
And not only are you seeking it out, but it like oozes out of you.
Oh yeah.
Like, when you were talking about gratitude being a part of your life, and like every part of your life, essentially, it's so obvious. Yeah. And anybody who knows you, like, if I speak to anyone who doesn't know you, which there aren't very many people, by the way, the first thing that I always tell them is how gracious and full of gratitude you are. Like, I'm not even trying to, like, I am trying to be nice, but I'm not, that's not the purpose of what I'm saying. It's just like, anyone who doesn't know you, who meets you, it's a true privilege to be in the presence of somebody who has so much gratitude. And we all have lessons to learn from that.
And it's contagious as hell. Like,
it is.
I was a negative Nancy before I started hanging out with you. And, like, it's so contagious because, your perspective changes. Like, I was raised very religious, but my mom used to always say, like, bad association spoils useful habits. Like, associate with those people that are good, right? And then, so negative Nancy all the time, when life gets you down, you're just like stuck in your own head, and you get around people that are super positive, and suddenly life is shitty when you get home and the dog's chewing up everything and your kids are screaming everywhere and you've got a to-do list 1.5 miles long. And suddenly you're like, look at, like, my kids are growing up. They've got a roof over their head, food on the table, so much to be happy for. And you just don't,
your lens
you don't
changes.
you don't realize that it's who you're hanging out with. You don't need to like focus on the negativity. You're like, you know, life is good. It's a privilege.
I love that shit. And there's Mel Robbins says, what you appreciate appreciates.
Oh, dang.
I'm going to say that one more time. What you appreciate appreciates.
Yes.
And like, I can see it in the both of you. You appreciate good people. You appreciate like giving back. You appreciate all of these beautiful things. I mean, it's been multiplying for you like tenfold, day by day by day. Right.
Well, and it kind of is very similar to the one that you just mentioned, where you said you take care of the work and the work takes care of you.
Absolutely.
Like it's all kind of the same idea. It's good shit.
It's good shit. I could not agree more, Sarah. We'd like to quote her and trademark that. This is good shit. Sarah Tucker. And I do want to leave off on a note for any of you guys listening that the biggest lesson that I've learned in the midst of my life, whether it was from my brother's passing or from the different things that have brought me to where I am in my journey, is the fact that if you look through the lens of the fact that you will only get this moment once, I am only going to be able to sit here in this particular moment at Hip Nation with Sarah and Shay. This moment's never coming back. If you look at every moment through that lens, your whole, like, nothing will ever be the same. You're never going to have a conversation with someone and go, when's this over? You're going to say to the barista, thank you for my coffee. I hope you have a wonderful day. Everything's going to change. The gray sky is not going to look gray because you're like, wow, like I got to experience gray sky today. I don't know. I mean, that's a bit cheesy, but my point is that I'm like, oh, wait. But that's been one of my greatest lessons. And I think that any time that someone comes across my path or I have the pleasure of meeting somebody or reconnecting with someone, like I don't take it for granted. And I certainly don't ever like take their presence in my life for granted. I just cherish every moment that I get with them. But I think when we're able to look through that lens, it won't matter what failure or what defeat comes your way. Everything changes before you.
It's spoken like a true motivational speaker, by the way. But also, it's so obvious that you truly do believe that. And I think a lot of people, I know personally, myself even, and a lot of people in my life could really learn a few lessons from your words. And your words, the things that you believe in truly reflect in your professional career and your professional life as well. Like you can see that you're being rewarded for how you're treating people and how you're not taking them for granted. Like you're doing the exact opposite, and that's been very rewarding for you.
Thank you.
And just a pleasure to watch.
Thank you.
And we haven't known you for very long, but
no,
even
it feels
in
like
the short time, we've seen you be able to reap the benefits of your amazing personality. And
thank you. I feel like we've known like each other so much longer than we have because it feels so natural.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I met Sarah, I was like, we sat beside each other at a bridal shower and I was like, I just love this woman. And we just chatted all night. Yeah. And I just instantly decided that she was just, I don't know.
It was great. That was a really great first, like, I don't usually like to speak to new people.
Yeah. It felt like, so natural.
Yeah, it did. And hearing your story and everything, and yeah, you're a fantastic human.
You too, both of you.
So our tradition,
yes,
and I know you listen, so you know this tradition, is to tell us favorite book or movie or song or TV show or whatever it is right now. What's your favorite?
Well, when it comes to book, actually, we'll start with movie. So my favorite movie is it's called About Time. And if you watch it, it has the girl that's in the Notebook and this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful movie. Yeah. If you watch that movie, you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so much like Francesca. Essentially, he can go back in time and he can relive every day to see things twice. So the first time he lives his day, everything is just mundane. He doesn't think twice about who's making his coffee or the whatever. But the second time he goes back in the day, he takes a moment to go, thank you for my coffee. And he looks up and he goes, he can hear the birds chirping. The guy on the bus that has his music blasting, instead of him being annoyed, he just decides to rock out to it. And all of a sudden, the purpose of the movie is that by the end, you're not having to live your day twice. You just live it once, but you appreciate it the first time.
Oh, that's cool.
So that movie, if any of you listening, definitely listen to that movie. The book that, I'm so actually surprised I didn't mention this, but I'll mention it now. The book Untamed by Glennon Doyle changed my life this past year. It's actually the reason I became my solo agent. And it was actually a mentor of mine that gave me the book.
What?
Shamey,
Don't
like,
judge me.
She always whips her phone out when people have book recommendations.
She's like, I'm going to put this back into my Amazon cart so I can buy it.
Yeah.
So in this book by Glennon Doyle, there's a quote, and I'll just say it. She goes, never again will I ever stay in a room, institution, relationship, or office that will ever make me abandon a part of myself. She talks about how she's like, I believe myself now, so I will not stay voluntarily, silently, or for much longer. And essentially the analogy that she used is that she was in this yoga class and it was really hot and she doesn't know why she stayed as long as she did. But when the class had ended, she zoomed out the door and she had to like throw up because she couldn't handle the heat. And she always thought to herself, why did I stay? The door wasn't even locked. And so oftentimes we'll find ourselves in situations where we think that we're stuck. We think that there's no movement, but the door is not locked. It's our choice to open it. And so I was in a situation about a year ago in business where I loved where I was, but it didn't feel like the right fit. And when one of my mentors gave me that book, I read that quote because she goes, I just remembered that the sun is, because she talks about picking up her mat and slowly, deliberately, and lightly walking out of the room while sending everybody, love that are meant to stay there for whatever portion of time to know, like, I think she said, she's like, for whoever's meant to stay in the room to know what like love and freedom is and what love and freedom is not. She's like, you guys, that's your turn. She's like, but it's my turn to slowly and deliberately and lightly walk out. But she goes, I just remembered that the sun is shining, the breeze is cool, and these doors are not even locked. So when you read that book, what Glennon Doyle embodies essentially is that no part of your life you're ever going to be stuck in. Whether you're in a relationship, a marriage, a business partnership, or whatever it is, every part of your journey is special, but just recognizing that if you're not truly happy, there's nothing stopping you from living your best life but yourself. Just open the door and walk out.
That is crazy.
That's wicked.
So those are my
super powerful
movie and book for you.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a very moving episode.
Right? We did get like, in a short period of time, we got deep.
Yeah.
I felt that was like really heavy.
I had goosebumps listening to all of us talking.
Tell everybody where they can find you professionally and if you want personally, but if not, it doesn't have to be that way.
Essentially, you can find me on Instagram if you just type in Francesca. I think my handle is like Francesca Amante because my name is way too long in Italian. So Francesca Amante is my personal Instagram, and then I have my Amante real estate page on Instagram. And then essentially, pretty much wherever you find Sarah and Shay doing JCI or community things, typically you won't find me too far from them.
Yep.
But other than that, I'm also you'll find me at the development or anywhere in the real estate world, but I'm only a phone call away. I would love to connect.
Super. Thanks again so much for coming.
Thank you very, very much for coming. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you both for having me. I was honored to be here.
Stay hip.